I was about 10, I stayed home alone while my mom took my younger brother to a doctor's appointment. It wasn't unusual. I was used to being by myself for short periods, and I actually liked the quiet. Our house was old, one of those heritage homes with tall ceilings that made everything echo. It always had this weird stillness when it was empty, but as a kid, what did I care? That day I was sitting on the couch, watching TV, when I heard a knock at the front door. It wasn't a light tap either. It was firm, insistent. My mom had always told me to never answer the door when I was alone, so I ignored it. But whoever it was did not stop. Another knock, then another. I got up and peeked through the window, careful not to be seen. There was no one there. No car in the driveway. No footsteps leading up to the door. Just an empty front yard. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to understand this. Maybe they had the wrong house. Maybe it was a prank. I was about to sit back down when the phone rang. Now, I never answered the house phone. If it was my mom, she'd call my little flip phone. If it was a telemarketer, they'd just hang up. But then the answering machine kicked in. What I heard could only be described as disturbing. It was music, not a voice, not a message, just this eerie, off-kilter carnival music. The kind you'd hear at a fairground or one of those traveling circuses. It crackled through the speakers, echoing throughout the house. The melody was slow and slightly distorted, like it was coming from an old record player. It truly freaked me out, but the music kept playing on the machine. No talking, no background noise, just that carnival music filling the entire house. I did not know how to work the answering machine properly, and tried desperately to turn it off. I hit all the buttons, but it just kept playing. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the music stopped. Silence. I don't know why, but I knew sometimes the person calling would still be on the other line after they left a message. So I reached for the phone, and I picked it up. What I heard on the other line was this soft, whispering voice that I could have sworn was saying my name. I asked who's calling, and the line went dead. Terrified, I hung up, backed away, and locked every door and window in the house. I even grabbed the cordless phone and carried it with me, just in case. I sat in the middle of the living room, staring at the door, waiting. I don't know how long I sat there before my mom and brother got home. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. But when they walked in, I practically ran to them. I told my mom everything. She checked the answering machine, but the message was gone, deleted. I hadn't touched it. She wasn't too concerned though, telling me it could have been a prank, or simply a wrong number. We did not have caller ID back then, and *69 just told us the number was unavailable. I seriously tried to forget about it, but for weeks after that, I kept thinking about that knocking, the music, the empty yard. Like, I'm positive someone was at my house that day, and I'm positive that same person was the one calling as well. But why? Why would someone do that to me? Years later, I came across a post about something called phantom phone calls. Stories of people receiving eerie, unexplained messages, often with music or static. Some were linked to old, disconnected numbers. Others were never traced at all. I don't know if that's what happened to me, but I do know one thing. I never stayed home alone again. I moved into my first apartment when I was 19, right after high school. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom in a pretty quiet complex. I did not have much, just a TV, a single chair, and an inflatable mattress. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had been living there for about a month when the scariest thing in my life happened. It was a Saturday night, and I was sitting in my living room watching TV. The front door was locked, top and bottom locks, as always. I wasn't expecting anyone. No maintenance, no friends coming over. Just a normal, quiet night. Then, out of nowhere, I heard keys going into my door. I looked over, trying to see if this was all in my imagination. I wasn't mishearing it. The metal scraped inside the lock, and I watched as the knob started to jiggle. Then the deadbolt turned. For a split second, I thought it might be maintenance, maybe some kind of mistake, but they usually knock first. Then the doorknob lock turned, and before I could react, the door swung open. An older Asian man stepped inside, dragging suitcases and a few boxes with him. The moment he saw me, his face twisted in pure rage. He started yelling in a language I did not understand, loud and aggressive. Before I could say anything, he rushed at me and started hitting me, hard. I barely had time to react before he grabbed me by the shirt and dragged me out of my own apartment. I was gasping, trying to fight back, but he was stronger than he looked. He had me in a chokehold, and all I could think was that I was about to pass out in the middle of the hallway with no one around to help me. Then, out of nowhere, my upstairs neighbor came running down. I had never been so grateful to see him in my life. He grabbed the guy and pulled him off of me. I stumbled back, coughing, and my neighbor kept himself between me and the man while we both tried to figure out what the hell was going on. The guy was still yelling, still pointing inside my apartment, his face red with anger. He wasn't just some random intruder. He was convinced that I was the one in the wrong. We called the police, and when they arrived, things got even more surreal. Turns out, the leasing office had made a massive mistake. This man had been assigned an apartment in the complex, Unit 54. Mine was 56. But someone in the office gave him my key and told him it was his new place. He had never been inside before. He had only seen pictures of an empty unit. So when he opened the door and saw me sitting there in a barely furnished apartment, he thought I was a squatter. That's why he freaked out. He genuinely believed I was illegally living in the place he had just bought. I pressed charges against him for the assault, and I also went after the apartment complex for what they did. The fact that they gave a complete stranger a key to my unit while I was living there was beyond dangerous. The guy did not move into the complex after the incident, which was a relief. And because of what happened, the apartment complex settled with me. I ended up staying an entire year, rent-free. It gave me time to actually save money and buy the furniture and essentials that I needed. It also made me realize something. I wasn't as safe as I thought I was. Not long after, I bought a pistol for protection. I didn't want to live paranoid, but after that night, I knew I couldn't rely on a locked door to keep me safe. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. We lived on a dead-end road, the only house for miles, surrounded by fields and thick woods. If someone came down our road at night, they were either lost or had a reason to be there. And most of the time, that reason wasn't good. I was a sophomore in high school when it happened. My parents had gone out for the night, leaving me in charge of my younger brother and sister. It wasn't anything new. I babysat them plenty of times before. The night started out normal. We ate dinner, watched TV, and got ready for bed. Then the dog started barking. Now, our dogs bark at everything. Coyotes, deer, even the wind sometimes. But this was different. They weren't just barking, they were losing their minds. I got up to check and saw headlights coming up the road. My first thought was that my parents had come home early, but as the truck got closer, I realized it wasn't their car. It pulled into our driveway and just sat there, engine running, headlights on. I stood at the window, frozen. The truck was not familiar, and no one got out. They just sat there for maybe 5 minutes. Then, just as suddenly, they backed out and left. I was trying to calm myself down when, about 10 minutes later, the truck came back. This time they pulled farther up into the yard. The dogs were still going crazy, snarling and lunging at the truck. My gut was telling me something was really wrong. I grabbed my brother and sister and took them to my parents' room, shoving them into my dad's closet. I told them to be quiet, no matter what. Then I grabbed my dad's shotgun. He had taught me how to use it since I was little. Gun safety, how to load and unload, how to aim. It was just one of those things you learned growing up in the South. Until that night, I had never needed to think about using it for real. I grabbed a few shells and stuffed them into my pocket, but I did not load it. Not yet. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, my heart hammering in my chest. The truck was still there, headlights shining straight at me. My dog, a big German Shepherd, was growling like I'd never heard before. The kind of sound that would make any sane person think twice. I called him to my side. I did not say a word to the people in the truck. I just stood there, holding the shotgun, letting them get a good look. Then I pumped it once, loud enough to cut through the night. That was all it took. The truck peeled out, kicking up dust and gravel as it sped back down the road. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear, my hand shaking so bad I could barely hold the gun. My dog was still tense, ears forward, watching. I stayed out there for a while, listening, making sure they weren't coming back. Then I finally went inside, locked every door, and checked every entrance. I found my brother and sister still huddled in the closet, wide-eyed. I told them it was okay, but I wasn't sure if I even believed it myself. I didn't sleep that night. I repeated the details in my head over and over. Red Toyota Tacoma, rear bumper missing. Red Tacoma, rear bumper missing. A few months later, 2 people were stabbed in their home just a couple of miles away from our house. They survived, but the story was enough to shake us. Not long after that, another house, about 10 miles away, was broken into and robbed. It was the first time we realized just how vulnerable we were out there. My parents did not hear about the break-ins until my mom mentioned our incident to a friend. By then, it had been a while, but the unease never really went away. I don't know who was in that truck or what they wanted, but I do know this. If I hadn't been standing on that porch with a shotgun, this whole thing might have ended very differently.